So a YouTuber called NeverKnowsBest did a video calling out a few other YouTubers, myself included. I want to address the biggest claims made against me in his video, as well as any other claims I think should be addressed. But first, I want to set the stage with a simple example.
Speaking of which, what did you have to say about me?
You're a cuck. You're a fucking cuck. Not only are you a cuck, you're like fat bastard cuck.
Oh, I guess he doesn't like me.
This is a clip from Never's video, and here's the full context.
I suppose, now that you've stuck with me for 5 hours, I should admit that the basis of my ex-lover theory comes from personal experience. I loved this series. The Elder Scrolls was like the first serious long-term relationship of my gaming dating life. I thought it was the one, that it understood me, that of all the games that I made, it was the one that was designed just for me. I guess I was young and naive. I didn't understand that things would change, for both of us. A lot has happened since those early days, but I'll always cherish those memories. I've never felt as connected to any virtual world as I did with you, back then. And now I'm getting older, I wonder if I'll ever feel that way about the virtual world again. I know you've gotten older too. I guess you've moved on. But I still wonder sometimes if you miss it. And I know you've achieved a lot. It's incredible really looking at how far you've come. But you had a passion back then. There was a spark. You understood what it meant to dream. And I just hope you still understand that. I hear you're with a new guy now. One with more money than me.
Oh my fucking god. You're a cuck. You're a cuck in your own metaphor. You're a fucking cuck. Really? Why would you...
I hope it works out for you. I moved on too, you know. Actually, I ended up starting a YouTube channel. You'd never guess what it's about. And it's been going pretty well. Although sometimes the videos do get a little weird. Well, this isn't exactly how I expected I'd end this series. But here we are. Hey, Elder Scrolls, if you're listening...
You literally... Not only are you a cuck, you're like fat bastard cuck.
This is something Patrician addressed in his own video. In fact, that's where I got the clip from. I recommend watching Patrician's video on this, but I bring this up to show that NeverKnowsBest selectively took clips from Patrician's stream and presented them in such a way so as to appear to his audience that Patrician just started insulting him for no reason whatsoever. I use this example because it's one of the most clear-cut instances of Never doing this without needing any extensive clips or elaboration to explain why this is bad. It is so obviously bad faith on its face that you should understand immediately what the problem is with what Never had done here. Much of his video has issues like this, where he will take things out of context or he will misrepresent things to his audience, seemingly in order to make those he's targeting look bad. For instance...
And someone did come along, a self-styled Bethesda expert whose most popular videos focus on explaining why other YouTubers are wrong about their opinion on Fallout.
Both of these are outright falsehoods, and this is set at the start of the section covering me. These claims are some of the first things you hear about me from him. The first impression people will get about me in his video is that I think I'm an expert, and that I tell people their opinions are wrong. To be a self-styled expert, you would need to present yourself as an expert on the subject. It's kind of in the name. I've never once claimed nor presented myself as such. Having a bunch of videos on the subject doesn't mean you're a self-styled expert. As for the second claim, this is an often repeated lie about me. It's not even the first time a bigger YouTuber has made this claim about me with absolutely no basis. Yes, I did make 2 very long videos responding to someone else's videos, but to just claim that I'm telling people their opinions are wrong, with no basis to the claim, is the height of dishonesty. These videos are dedicated to refuting the poor argumentation, misrepresentations, and falsehoods that many a true nerd makes about these games. To give a quick example, one of the big criticisms against Fallout 3 that he's responding to in this video is the general lack of choice. To refute this criticism, he explains that there's lots of hidden choices in the game, that people simply assume there wasn't a lot of choice because they didn't explore to find all the hidden choices in the world. He then cites a hidden ending for the quest Superhuman Gambit, which requires you to find information in an obscure dungeon for this option to become available. The problem with this example is that this is the only instance of such a thing within the entire game. Needless to say, a single extra choice does not thwart the criticism that the game generally lacks choice. That is clearly not telling someone their opinion is wrong. he made an argument in defense of the game, he made a claim about the content the game contains, a claim that is factually incorrect. These strike me as bad faith because they seem designed to unfairly bias the audience against me. In its presentation here, the claim that someone is a self-styled expert on something like that seems to imply an unwarranted sense of self-importance or a pompous attitude. The other claim is obvious on its face. Saying someone's opinion is wrong will be read by many as people saying someone's feelings are wrong. You are wrong for liking this thing. Again, this has no basis in reality. That's not what I do in either of these videos at all, and it's dishonest to imply that it is. This is the kind of thing doing some research would have prevented. Part of what's so bizarre about this video is in the fact that Never makes many accusations of bad faith tactics, while engaging in those same exact tactics, sometimes within moments of the accusation.
Still, the important point I want to make clear to people is how Creetosis frames what Emil says as negatively as possible throughout the entire video and in every point Creetosis makes. For example, instead of saying things like Emil says, Creetosis will say Emil rambles, to make the very act of speaking in a speech somehow seem like a sin.
I frame everything as negatively as possible, he says, while framing what I'm doing as negatively as he can. While I admittedly use the word rambles a bit too much in the video, I am using it as shorthand for either stuff that's unimportant to the topic at hand, or ML taking an exceedingly long time to get to the point he's trying to make, because there's a lot of unnecessary padding and tangents. Whenever I say he's rambling, it effectively means I'm cutting fairly big portions of the speech to save time, rather than playing a clip in full. The video this comes from is already over 6 hours long, and it would be longer if I included every little tangent and reference he makes in full. Also remember that this is a speech about writing games at a conference. This isn't an off-the-cuff interview or conversation, or even thread on Twitter, 4chan, or Reddit. Anyone interested in learning about writing has to cut through the chaff to attempt to draw anything useful from this speech, like trying to draw blood from a stone. A very large portion of this speech is wasted on things that simply don't matter to the subject being discussed, like making references to Star Wars at random, which provides no substance whatsoever. Yes, ML uses it as a lead-in to talk about something else, but in its presentation it comes off as disjointed, awkward, random, and completely out of place.
But they're great, and I work with this team to create our stories, and but like I said, our stories are played, not made. And so this slide I know is coming out of nowhere. What does this possibly have to do with anything, right? Like, this is Han and Chewie from Star Wars. Everything goes back to Star Wars, right? That should be a slide on its own, right? I love the scene in Star Wars. What's happening here in Star Wars? This is Han Solo's been frozen, and he comes out and he says, I've been out for a little while, and everyone's having delusions of grandeur, right? That's what this slide is about, delusions of grandeur. So, when we start writing a story at Bethesda, when I start working with the team, we start big.
Because of stuff like that, this speech is effectively useless to anyone actually interested in the process of writing stories for games, because when you cut all the filler, there's very little substance here, and the advice he does give is so malformed that it largely comes across as useless. I spend quite a bit of time talking about it in my video, but ML cites the example of how he drew from his experience as a Christian when making Oblivion's Dark Brotherhood, and all it amounts to is, the Night Mother is the Virgin Mary, and Sith is his god. But we don't know what that's even supposed to mean for this point because A, this is something anyone could do regardless of their religion, and B, he doesn't actually explain how this affects the process or how this is good for writing. It comes across as very shallow and uninformative in a speech talking about writing for games. Because of stuff like that, as well as the bits that are just irrelevant and waste time, it feels like this is someone's school presentation that had been padded out to reach the minimum time required. In Patrician's video, he brings up a theory that this video by NeverKnowsBest is a trap, and after some consideration, I have to agree. It presents some pretty harsh and inflammatory accusations, and it seems as though this video is designed to invoke either a vitriolic response, or at the very least some level of justified anger that could potentially be used against us. For example, NeverKnowsBest essentially accuses Patrician of plagiarism over a single line in this video.
Why don't we at least let him say his closing line, Bo, after talking about his video for so long? It's only fair, I guess.
And that's why I find a sense of finality with this project. A sense of poetic closure. There is not an image smug enough to portray how vindicated I feel at years of Bethesda fans denying what I had to say and being rewarded with this game. Starfield is absolutely the game that you deserve.
Well, that's a nice final line, I suppose. Very punchy. Good delivery. But it does sound a little bit familiar to me. I mean, it kind of sounds like something I might write. In fact, it kind of sounds like something I did write. But if you are someone who only praised the Outer Worlds because that praise fits nicely into your Bethesda-dominated worldview, then I just want you to know that the Outer Worlds is exactly the game you deserve.
Plagiarism is a pretty extreme accusation to be leveling at someone without good reason, and requires far more evidence than one single statement that is similar. This is the kind of thing that could ruin someone's reputation. Many plagiarists have rightfully had their entire careers destroyed for said plagiarism, such as that game journalist from a few years ago who is ripping off YouTube reviews. The nature of words, language, and people, with a wide variety of beliefs, opinions, and ways of doing things, will inevitably result in someone eventually saying something similar to something you once said, at complete random. To imply patrician using this line as plagiarism is absurd on its face, because not only is this just kind of a normal statement to make, especially given the context, but considering one of the most well-known parts of the Joker is the line, "You get what you fucking deserve," this particular phrasing has become a lot more common since the release of this movie. I legitimately cannot count the number of times I've heard the phrase "you get what you deserve," or some variation of it, since the release of that movie in videos and streams I watch on this platform. Not only that, but "you get what you deserve," or "you got what you deserve," is an idiom that predates the Joker by decades. It's a matter of common speech. Look at any video on YouTube of someone injuring themselves by doing something stupid, and there will invariably be someone in the comments saying that person got what they deserved. To even imply such a thing as plagiarism is farcical and reeks of someone intending to damage his target, as opposed to having any legitimate grievance of stolen work. This accusation feels like bait, because anyone accused of plagiarism for something so small would be rightfully and justifiably angry that such a potentially damaging accusation was made over something so insignificant. This feels like it's intended to start drama with other people. It feels like it's begging for an angry response full of profanity. This video also feels like a trap, because he'll occasionally throw lines out there to the effect of, "You criticize others, so you should be able to handle criticism, right?"
Creetosis has a long-running stream/podcast where he focuses on criticizing other people's YouTube videos, which is great, because that surely means he won't have any problem with me doing the same to one of his videos.
Which reads to me as, if you respond, you're proving you can dish it out but can't take it. While at the same time he's misrepresenting me and lying about me, therefore provoking a response that would allow him to claim I'm a hypocrite or something. I can't read minds. I'm not saying that is his intention, but it is very much the impression I get. It's the only natural conclusion I can come to based on him saying that while constantly misrepresenting me. But let's move on to some of the big claims. One of his big claims against me is I take ML out of context to make him look stupid or to make his speech look like nonsense.
Then there are parts where he either inadequately summarizes Emil or takes things he says out of context to try to make Emil sound stupid or to just make the speech sound nonsensical.
He rambles more about the creation of Fallout 4 in Boston, lists some places he knew, and even says he put his bedroom from when he was a kid into the game. Not sure what this has to do with story writing, but okay.
This, by the way, relates to story writing because he's talking about drawing from personal experience in his writing, this time with growing up in Boston, and the part about his bedroom is just a light-hearted joke. Creetosis, if you're ever unsure how to identify jokes, a good way is to just listen to whether the audience laughs. Here's context.
And that is where I grew up. Humboldt Place, that's the street I grew up in. Of course, I had to put my bedroom in the game. Right?
I've already mentioned how this speech is a rambling mess, how he wastes time on stuff that doesn't matter or is unimportant, and this is another example of that, which is why I cut it. ML doesn't really talk about living in Boston here. He's listing landmarks he knows, something that is not unique to the experience of someone who grew up in this city. I've never been to New York, but if I made a game that takes place there, I'd include the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, Central Park, and Madison Square Garden. If I could afford it, I'd probably go there to scout out lesser-known local hotspots that people living there would be more familiar with. I'd talk to the people who live there to find neat little hole-in-the-wall places that most tourists would miss. Hell, this is something Obsidian did when they made New Vegas. There's a reason Goodsprings resembles the real-world Goodsprings so closely. The best part about this is that Never is accusing me of removing context.
Then there are parts where he either inadequately summarizes Emil, or takes things he says out of context to try to make Emil sound stupid, or to just make the speech sound nonsensical,
while at the same time manipulatively editing footage to take me out of context.
Here's context.
And that is where I grew up. Humble place, that's the street I grew up in. Of course, I had to put my bedroom in the game. Right?
Here's the context NeverKnowsBest left out, the stuff I skipped, because it adds little to nothing, and as I accurately describe, it is a rambling mess.
So I grew up on those experiences. And so when we came to Fallout 4, the game is set in Boston, okay? I grew up in Boston. For me it was easy, right? I knew that I could use my own experiences and leverage that in telling the story. So, and these are literally places I grew up. Fenway Park became Diamond City. The Hatch Shell, where they have concerts, became, I think there's a crazy cult in the game. The Swan Boats, where I grew up going to the Swan Boats. That's in the game. I won't tell you what's there, spoilers. But I had been to all these locations. And this place right here, this is Joe's Sandwich Shop, a location that I was very familiar with. That is also in the game. And that is where I grew up. Humble place, that's the street I grew up in. Of course, I had to put my bedroom in the game. Right? So I was able to leverage my own personal experiences, obviously. Write what you know, I know Boston.
And one last time, this is what I said. He rambles more about the creation of Fallout 4 in Boston, lists some places he knew, and even says he put his bedroom from when he was a kid into the game. Not sure what this has to do with story writing, but okay. He tries to make it look like the context I cut to make ML look bad is a single innocuous line, the joke about his bedroom. Then he takes a shot at me missing the joke, when the point I was making is that he brought up a bunch of stuff here with no substance whatsoever. It is meaningless. You could cut this landmarks and bedroom section from his speech entirely, and you'd lose nothing, which is why my reaction to this is, I'm not sure what this has to do with story writing. He does eventually get to the point of a mob boss who lived in Boston, and as a child this mob boss was the monster in the closet for him, and he drew from that to make the Institute, but that's entirely separate from this section where he shows off landmarks. It's almost like I cut that section to save time, because it was long and unnecessary. Just to reiterate, NeverKnowsBest accused me of cutting context in order to make someone look bad, while simultaneously cutting context in order to make me look bad. This is a common theme across this video. It's why I started off the video with that clip where he takes Patrician out of context. This isn't an accident. It's not a coincidence. This is intentional and malicious. You don't make edits like these if you're not trying to cause damage to the people you're covering. To put it simply, his video is a hatchet job. It's a shameless hit piece, and all throughout he tries to act morally superior towards those he's covering, while engaging in the exact same behaviors he's accusing them of. Returning to the subject of taking people out of context, there is a very egregious instance of this that he does to me here, where he skips about 13 minutes of video to make it look like I'm intentionally misrepresenting what ML is saying.
Regardless, the final type of example is similar, except it involves misrepresenting Emil's key points or writing rules so that Creetosis can make an argument against them to discredit them. Here is Creetosis on Keep It Simple Stupid.
This is a pretty good phrase. I like it, as it applies to, well, just about everything. Except fucking story writing. As far as this phrase goes, it absolutely does not apply to story writing. In the creation of fiction, the more complex and detailed the world, events, and characters are, the better.
Remember, Emil said he uses this rule in relation to themes, and that he thinks having a single strong central theme is good. Creetosis, on the other hand, is claiming that Emil applies this rule to all writing and all aspects of storytelling, and Emil claims all parts of stories should be as simple as possible, which is something that Emil has never said.
When Emil starts into the discussion about themes, I spend a great deal of time criticizing what he's saying and the examples he's using. For a section on Keep It Simple Stupid, he talks about themes, but doesn't seem to properly understand it, talking only in either basic or vague terms. He says a lot of great movies or games have one or two central themes. He throws up some slides saying a movie or game is about something, then moves on. This is a good parallel to his story writing skills. We hit some surface level details that are never expanded upon or developed. What is Casablanca about? It's about love, but in reality it's about sacrifice. Great, can you tell me more? No, he just moves on to the next example and does the same thing. Same absolutely applies to story writing, even in examples I've already provided. Something happens, then you're pushed along to the next quest. Don't question it, don't ask the why, just move on.
And of course, The Last of Us. If you think of a game with a great story, a lot of people think of The Last of Us. And that sort of combines the themes of, of family, of survival, and about working together. So it's a game about a virus and a post-apocalypse, but really it's the story of these two characters and how they're trying to work together, right? And, Skyrim. Skyrim is a game about dragons, right? Even in the studio, what is the game about? It's about dragons, but the story is not really about dragons, right? It is about the lone hero, right? It is much more biblical than a lot of the other stories we've done. It's about the Dragonborn, the Dovahkiin, is much more of a messiah sort of character.
It's a bit weird that he can get the theme of The Last of Us right, then he immediately trips and stumbles all over the place with Skyrim. In fact, it's shocking that he essentially admits that the whole point of Skyrim was the dragons, especially considering how poorly implemented they were. Themes are absolutely an important part of writing a story, but when it comes to Skyrim, he says it's all about dragons, but not really. It's about the lone hero, and goes so far as to say it's almost biblical, that the Dragonborn is something of a messiah. But he doesn't elaborate on the subject, and just moves on, when it would be helpful to understand what he even means when he says this. This implies poor priorities on Bethesda's part. It implies the thing I've been talking about for much of this video, and that is the whole rule of cool or style over substance issue. We were all so focused on dragons because they're cool. We didn't have dragons in Morrowind or Oblivion.
So Fallout 4 is about androids, right? Or is it? I mean, with Fallout 4, there are a lot of themes, right? Fallout 4 is about 1950s Americana. Or Fallout 4 is about, the post-apocalypse. But at its core, Fallout 4 is about androids that look like humans, okay? And so
first of all, 1950s Americana isn't a theme. It's an aesthetic. It's like saying your game that takes place in the Victorian era is a theme, or your game where the buildings all have Gothic architecture is a theme. Then he includes the post-apocalypse, which again, isn't a theme. A theme in a story is essentially the deeper meaning of that story, or what it's really about at the core of it. Stuff like the hero's journey, growing old, revenge, freedom, death, war and sending inexperienced men to their deaths, being human, hope, family, good versus evil, identity, man versus nature, redemption, and so forth. Having a 1950s aesthetic is not a fucking theme, and neither is the post-apocalypse. The post-apocalypse is a setting, it's the backdrop for the story you're telling. The theme of Fallout as a whole is that no matter how much changes technologically or within our societies, war will always be a fact of life for humanity. Keep in mind too, these examples are only part of the massive segment of my video he has to skip to get the clips he used to make it look like I was changing ML's point. I in no way whatsoever changed the point ML was making in order to discredit him or strawman him. NeverKnowsBest presents this as though I don't even address ML's points about themes, that I just go off about writing in general, but I actually do go into detail about themes at length in response to what ML is saying. I go into the tangent about all the writing being simple after the fact, because most, if not all of the writing in Fallout 4 in particular, is shallow, which is the subject of the video my coverage of this speech comes from. He also excludes the part where I criticize suspicion being a strong central theme in Fallout 4, mainly because it's not strong at all. It's an idea that's barely touched upon and forgotten. You never get betrayed by anyone you might come to trust, because such characters who betray you tend to be very short-lived in these games. There's also something in there that I want to single out because it's an outright lie.
Creetosis, on the other hand, is claiming that Emil applies this rule to all writing and all aspects of storytelling, and Emil claims all parts of stories should be as simple as possible, which is something that Emil has never said.
I did not at all, ever in my video, make the claim that ML applies this rule to all writing. This is quite literally something NeverKnowsBest just invented out of thin air. Such a statement would be damning, irrefutable evidence of me lying about ML. So if this is something I actually said, then why did he not play the clip of me saying it? Simple. Because it didn't happen.
Making sure we remember that you are truly interacting with them, okay? This is the experience. The player has a controller in their hand, and they can alter the narrative whenever they want.
No, they can't! They literally cannot alter the narrative anytime they want. What the actual fuck are you talking about, you clown?
The context for this is Emil talking about the interactive nature of games as a medium. Hence, make sure to remember players can always alter the narrative whenever they want. Creetosis instead presents this as if Emil is making an absolute claim. These kinds of examples are tiresome and dishonest, but it can be hard to identify if these result from a failure of Creetosis' reading comprehension, leading to him genuinely misunderstanding, or if this is instead a deliberate attempt to purposefully misrepresent Emil to make him look as bad as possible.
This is yet another big misrepresentation due to cutting context. Again, the thing he accuses me of doing repeatedly. Never says I'm presenting this as though ML is making an absolute statement, and he cuts off as though he had more to say.
Creetosis instead presents this as if Emil is making an absolute claim.
But he doesn't explain what he means here. An absolute statement in what way? About what exactly? All of gaming? Or Bethesda games, or just Fallout 4? Here is the full context. He then goes on about how important characters, interaction, and narrative choice are. Sir, are you aware of what game you created? He uses this to go into the dialogue system with the controller as his image, which already explains the idea behind the 4 options.
And what is most important to us. And so for us, we realize that one of the most important thing is people, characters, NPCs, interacting with the characters in the world. And again, making sure we remember that you are truly interacting with them, okay? This is the experience. The player has a controller in their hand, and they can alter the narrative whenever they want.
No, they can't! They literally cannot alter the narrative anytime they want. What the actual fuck are you talking about, you clown? This is a game in which your 4 dialogue options have a different opening response from the NPC you're talking to, that smash cuts into the same generic dialogue that all 4 options also receive in the vast majority of your conversations, with extremely few chances to ever change the narrative. Take for example meeting Sean. 3 of your responses at one stage in this conversation has him trying to convince you that he's your son due to you not perceiving the passage of time while frozen. The 4th option has you accept immediately that he is your son, He confirms this, then goes right back to trying to convince you as if you denied it. The full context of what Never is dishonestly excluding here is that ML is starting to explain why the 4-option dialogue wheel exists in Fallout 4, and where I say that Fallout 4 is a game where you can almost never alter the narrative. He shows the outburst of frustration, but excludes all the substance of my arguments to make it look like I'm getting mad at the very idea that games are interactive, and he takes a shot at me about reading comprehension when, again, he just cut the substance of what I was explaining. Based on what Never says, the impression I get is that because you control things in a game, that means you've always got the power to alter the narrative, which simply isn't true. If I play Halo and decide to jump off a cliff and die, I haven't altered the narrative. I get sent to a checkpoint and continue the story.
He does the same thing with the second rule, write what you know.
He concludes that write what you know simply means draw from your personal experience, and it takes a lot of inane rambling to get to this point. This is also a point I very much disagree with. You can write good stories without direct first-hand knowledge or personal experience. You can be inspired by someone else's experience they're told to you, or that you hear of to write great things.
So, Creetosis claims Emil's rule is only right about things you have first-hand experience with, and yet in reality, all Emil said was draw from your own experiences. He did not say they have to be first-hand.
This is one of the more baffling accusations NeverKnowsBest makes about me, because the clip he uses in his video refutes the very argument he makes immediately after playing the clip. He concludes that write what you know simply means draw from your personal experience, and it takes a lot of inane rambling to get to this point. This is also a point I very much disagree with. You can write good stories without direct first-hand knowledge or personal experience. It literally says that it means to draw from personal experience, and more importantly, that good stories can be made without first-hand knowledge or personal experience. Worst yet, NeverKnowsBest himself misquotes ML, and even has a caption on screen that shows he did this.
And yet, in reality, all Emil said was draw from your own experiences.
Again, in a video all about calling out other people for misrepresenting or taking things out of context, there is mountains of evidence of NeverKnowsBest misrepresenting things and taking things out of context, but then he makes obvious mistakes like this that expose what he's doing. He continues that point in such a way as to try and make me look stupid.
So, Creetosis claims Emil's rule is only right about things you have first-hand experience with, and yet in reality, all Emil said was draw from your own experiences. He did not say they have to be first-hand, and in fact, the example he immediately gives is writing the Dark Brotherhood, an assassin's guild. And as far as I'm aware, Emil Pagliarello does not have any real-life experience of being in an assassin's guild.
Again, I did not ever claim that ML said first-hand experience. This is another outright lie by NeverKnowsBest. And he keeps pushing this lie in such a way as to make me look stupid for not realizing that the man who wrote the Assassin's Guild is not in an Assassin's Guild in real life. This is just blatantly insulting and dishonest.
The final example is from the paper plane section that we heard earlier, which is probably the second most widely misinterpreted part of the original speech, after Kiss. Here's Creetosis' response.
This honestly just makes him look like a complete dickhead here, and this just comes across as an excuse for being lazy and writing a shit story. I have so many problems with this mentality. Just because someone is going to spend 200 hours building shacks doesn't mean they're never going to see the story, as evidenced by all the people who did see the fucking story. I like building shit in games that have that feature. I also want to enjoy a good story in Fallout 4, and got nothing. This is essentially saying that because side content exists that may distract players, they're gonna shit all over your story, which is monumentally fucking stupid.
So, what Emil actually says is that when writing a story for a game, make sure to remember that players won't always do what you want them to, as they play their own way. And yet Creetosis presents this as if Emil is saying, don't bother writing a story at all, or don't try when writing a story, because players might not care about it. Which Emil quite clearly neither says nor implies.
Notice how he doesn't actually include what ML says here as evidence that I'm wrong? I'll just include that clip here for him.
When you're writing a story for a video game, you always have to keep the player in mind, right? And so what happens with, we're writing our great American novel. This is the process. This is what happens at Bethesda when you write the main story of a game, and even some of the smaller stories. So let's say, okay, we're going to write the great American novel. It's going to be this thick, and on every page will be written comedy and tragedy, and it'll be wonderful. It'll be amazing. And you're going to give this book, this great American novel, to the player. And what are they going to do with it? They're going to rip out every page and make paper airplanes out of them. And they're going to throw them around the room. And they're never going to see your story. Because the story is there, right? But they are going to spend 30 hours making shacks. Okay? They're going to spend 20 hours looking for bobbleheads. Okay? But that's okay. We know that going in. That's the jagged pill that we swallow when we do this.
It absolutely is the implication. Having rewatched this segment again to do this video, I get the impression ML realized what he was saying here, because he does a really weird swerve to start talking about how the players are great, and he leaves his point about the great American novel unfinished. But yes, ML talks about writing his great American novel, and how no one will ever see it, because they're building shacks. In his own words, it's the jagged pill he has to swallow. The implication is that all of his hard work is for nothing, as he literally says in his speech, they're never going to see your story. The misinterpretation is in the idea that there is anything of value or substance to what he said. This comes across as someone with no understanding of how people play games is just completely out of touch with gaming. Maybe there will be some people who never touch the story, but to write it off as no one ever seeing your great American novel because they'll rip the pages out, make paper airplanes and build shacks, seems like the peak of ignorance.
Peak of ignorance indeed.
He doesn't even attempt to refute what I'm saying here. He just smugly repeats what I said as though it's applicable to what I say in this section. Again, ML literally says that people will never see a story because they're building shacks.
And you're going to give this book, this great American novel, to the player. And what are they going to do with it? They're going to rip out every page and make paper airplanes out of them. And they're going to throw them around the room. And they're never going to see your story. Because the story is there, right? But they are going to spend 30 hours making shacks.
I don't know how you could possibly come to any other conclusion, because that is literally what he said.
There are also a lot more personal attacks.
No, it does not fucking sound great. Klingon promotion in the Brotherhood would be absolutely fucking nonsense. What are you talking about, you absolute fucking clown person? Well, no fucking shit, Sherlock. He then makes some nonsensical comparisons between games and movies. Killing this dumb bitch in Skyrim is not the Red Wedding. This is actually the perfect representation of how simplistic his understanding of everything is. This really speaks to his level of maturity.
Ah yes, Emil is the one coming across as immature here, unlike the completely mature and not at all unhinged Creetosis.
I am allowed to be frustrated when dealing with inane and stupid comments from someone. You can selectively edit a lot of videos to try and make someone appear unhinged like this, with the context removed. Sometimes it's completely natural to call someone a moron when they say something dumb. Case in point, the Skyrim Red Wedding example. He's talking about how games can give an experience that you can't get watching film, and he gives a few examples, including the Red Wedding from Game of Thrones.
This slide's actually not fair. All right, I fully admit. The Red Wedding, okay? Everyone loves a Red Wedding, me too. So this is a cheap shot. But you know, the advantage of games is that, you know, not only can you watch the Red Wedding, you can cause the Red Wedding, which this is a Skyrim Dark Brotherhood quest that I want. Like, as soon as I got the assignment to do the Dark Brotherhood in Skyrim, I'm like, gotta do the Red Wedding.
The reason for my aggravated response, one of the examples he's claiming I'm unhinged for, is because it is patently absurd to equate killing some bint with no actual importance or relevance to anything in the game, aside from the quest in which you kill her, to one of the biggest moments in A Song of Ice and Fire, where multiple characters have their stories outright permanently ended, and others are completely changed as a result of this event. By the way, I say the same thing in my video. This is once again an example of cut context. He starts this montage off saying this.
There are also a lot more personal attacks.
So it's perfectly fine to lie and misrepresent someone and remove context to make them look dishonest or stupid, all for the sake of intentionally and maliciously trying to damage them and their reputation. But remember folks, insults are bad.
At one point, there even seems to be a call to action.
The future of Fallout is fucking doomed if it remains in this man's control.
Which does feel a little bit concerning, given just how openly Creetosis seems to hate Emil. And this is just one of several videos Creetosis has made about him.
So this is actually a very serious claim that is borderline defamatory. A call to action is a legal term in which one tries to compel someone to do something. In this case, the implication seems to be that I want people to go and do something to get ML fired, which is not the case at all. A call to action is something like calling for people to harass someone, or protest, or send mail or emails en masse. A call to action is not stating an opinion that someone is incompetent at their job and will continue to make poorly written stories. NeverKnowsBest also exaggerates how I feel about ML. I don't like the guy, but Never is acting like I want to see ML jobless, homeless, in the gutter, and miserable, and he's even acting like I might personally do something given the faux concern, when all I want is for him to not have any major influence over Elder Scrolls or Fallout anymore. He could still be a quest designer, I just don't want him writing because he's not good at it. I don't wish ill upon the man, I just don't want him writing. I also want to point out another little dishonest thing he does here. He mentions how I have made several videos on him, and shows the video breaking down the speech, the stream where I covered the speech with friends, the video covering the Twitter thread, and a time-coded section in my Fallout 4 analysis. The standalone breakdown of the speech is that entire segment from my Fallout 4 analysis. This is something he should know, as I open the standalone video saying as much. There's also another thing worth mentioning here, and that's how he's showing my channel here, which is clearly not necessary when showing the specific videos in which I talk about ML, and this is not the first time he's just shown the channel like this. Showing it at the start of the section makes sense. You're introducing the person you're talking about, but then he goes on to show the channel at other points in the video.
Well, thank God we have resident Emil expert Creetosis here to decode what Emil really means, and to decide what is and isn't necessary to talk about at a Danish games conference.
It strikes me as though he's directing his audience to my channel by doing this. He's misrepresented me and outright lied about me to a pretty extreme degree, while showing my channel on screen, so anyone frustrated by what a terrible person I am knows where to go. Is this his intent? I don't know, but it is the impression I get. Why else just randomly show the channel at random when you're telling the world I'm stupid and dishonest and unhinged?
I would like to point out that Creetosis' summary of Emil's speech is longer than Emil's speech, and if your summary is longer than the original, I don't think you can really criticize others for rambling.
Again, NeverKnowsBest talks at length about how misrepresenting people is bad, while himself misrepresenting me, again, with evidence on screen that defeats his own point. Anyone with a functional brain understands the difference between a summary and a breakdown. This should not need to be explained. You are not a child, Never, nor are you as stupid as to think that a summary and a breakdown are the same thing. There is also a difference between rambling and talking at length. You can talk about a subject for 5 hours straight without it being rambling if you're focused and have a great understanding of the subject and are good at speaking. Further, it being a breakdown of his speech, there is a very large portion of his speech in my video that contributes to the overall timecode. If your video contains all, or the majority of the video you're covering, it will never be shorter than the original due to the nature of containing much or all of the original video. That is how time works. This is pretty much the end of the big things worth responding to, aside from the ending of this whole section.
I do wonder, what about YouTubers who make low-quality videos that are full of misrepresentations, contradictions, and outright hate? What should happen to them?
They should be fired.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. YouTubers are often allowed to say whatever they want, and usually they get away with it.
This is particularly ironic given the fact he just spent the past 20 minutes of his video misrepresenting me and contradicting himself. In fact, the only thing he did get right through the entire section that wasn't manipulative is when I hyperbolically said that ML repeated a phrase like a dozen times, and he had apparently only said it 4 times, a point that is so unimportant, I didn't even bother to fact check to see if he actually said it 4 times.
Still, this second video is likely Creetosis' most successful video of all time, receiving over 240k views in just 2 weeks, meaning a lot of people have tuned in to listen to his expert analysis on the mind and writing of Emil Pagliarulo. This also means Creetosis is making decent money off of Emil's name.
Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please subscribe. Yes, I make money off of YouTube. So are you in this video where you misrepresent me and other people to thousands upon thousands of people. You don't get to act morally superior about making money when you're down in the mud and slinging shit at people because you don't like what they're saying. Had any of us actually done anything wrong, any of the things you accuse us of, then you might have a point. People shouldn't be able to profit off of lies and misrepresentations, hint hint. But in this case, you're demonizing and villainizing genuine criticism. Case in point.
Now, I'm mostly focusing on 3 different Emil critics, and we've now covered 2 of them. Of the 3, Creetosis is the worst. The final critic seems to have none of Creetosis' genuine hatred for Emil. Meanwhile, a flying nun shouldn't even be considered in the same category as these other 2. They were just a disappointed fan who let their passion get the better of them a little bit when writing a Reddit post that unexpectedly blew up. I'm sure there was no real malicious intent behind it, which is not the case with Creetosis.
My genuine criticism of some games, a company, and a man responsible for much of the content we see in these games is malicious according to NeverKnowsBest. I suppose he used the power of divination to learn my true intent was to destroy this random game developer's life or something. It's not that I want these games to be better, it's not that I want to enjoy future Elder Scrolls and Fallout games, it's not that I wanted Starfield to be good, it's that I have some malicious motive and I don't even know what that motive is because he doesn't say. I'm just apparently malicious because my criticism is harsh.
One thing I particularly dislike about these videos is that Creetosis paints himself as the victim of the situation.
And for years, if you had the audacity to say anything bad about these games, the amount of pushback and vitriol you got was insane. Yes, it's the internet and people will be shitheads about anything and everything, but many Bethesda fans go fucking rabid when you criticize their games.
Well, I'm sure that must have been very hard for you to deal with. But you do say on multiple occasions how much you believe in criticism and how important and valuable you think it is. You even say as much in this video when complaining about Emil's apparent inability to take criticism.
This kind of mentality is poison to creativity and self-improvement, because it promotes the idea that criticism in and of itself is bad.
And so, in that case, I guess you should be open to criticism of yourself, which is what I will admit I am doing right now. So I'm sure you'll appreciate my input.
This is another dishonest tactic. It's trying to paint any response into being an automatic loss. He's also intentionally conflating criticism for shit-flinging. When someone comes onto my video and calls me a stupid idiot New Vegas fanboy because I criticized Bethesda Fallout, that is not criticism. If they were to say I'm a stupid idiot New Vegas fanboy because I intentionally left out a piece of information that they can prove I knew about beforehand that directly counters my argument, then that would be a form of criticism. It can't just be random insults with nothing behind it, which is what I was referring to, and what you tried to paint me as doing when you removed all the substance from my insults. To conflate it as such is dishonest. What's particularly annoying about this is how he's using that as a shield, that I should appreciate what he has to say about me because it's criticism, when I have thoroughly proved he's been misrepresenting me this entire time. If your criticism relies on taking your target out of context repeatedly, and lying about them, and accusing them of doing so when they didn't, it is not criticism.
But if you don't, if you are sitting there right now listening to this, thinking about how much you hate me, and how unfair this is, And how could a bigger YouTuber do something so cruel as to try to hold you to account for the things you've openly said? Well, consider this. Everything I've said has been based on the truth, and none of it has come from a place of hate. So think about how you're feeling right now, and imagine what it would be like to be criticized like this, except based on lies.
Don't piss on me and tell me it's raining.
Somehow, I doubt this will be a turning point in your life where you develop genuine maturity, self-awareness, and empathy. But I hope it is. It's never too late to grow as a person.
Now he's just being condescending because he thinks he can get away with it now that he's set up his trap that if I respond, it's proof that I can't take criticism. It's also just very hypocritical. I'm the one who needs to mature and learn empathy for criticizing a AAA game company and its lead writer, who doesn't even know I exist, but it's fine that Never can knowingly lie and misrepresent me, accuse me of things he himself does, and even accuses me of a potential crime, all while casually directing his fanbase at me, who he has poisoned against me with blatant falsehoods. But I'm the one who needs to mature and develop empathy. Okay. That pretty much wraps up the section of his video on me. There are some other things I could respond to, but they're much less important than what I've covered here, and now that we're here, at the end of this road, I ask you, NeverKnowsBest, was it worth it? Was it worth making such blatantly obvious falsehoods that could easily be countered, which would make you look bad? Was it worth potentially burning your credibility to the ground? If you have any decency or integrity as a person, you'll remove your video, retract your lies and misrepresentations, and issue an apology to everyone you targeted in that video.
I suppose, now that you've stuck with me for 5 hours, I should admit that the basis of my ex-lover theory comes from personal experience. I loved this series. The Elder Scrolls was like the first serious long-term relationship of my gaming dating life. I thought it was the one, that it understood me, that of all the games that are made, it was the one that was designed just for me. I guess I was young and naive. I didn't understand that things would change for both of us. A lot has happened since those early days, but I'll always cherish those memories. I've never felt as connected to any virtual world as I did with you back then. And now I'm getting older, I wonder if I'll ever feel that way about the virtual world again. I know you've gotten older too. I guess you've moved on. But I still wonder sometimes if you miss it. And I know you've achieved a lot. It's incredible really looking at how far you've come. But you had a passion back then. There was a spark. You understood what it meant to dream. And I just hope you still understand that. I hear you're with a new guy now. One with more money than me.